The following is a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Hello, and welcome to the Healthcare Facilities Network. I'm your host, Peter Martin, president of Goslin Martin Associates. You know, the Healthcare Facilities Network is dedicated to filling the pipeline of new employees into healthcare facilities management. We talk to the young, we talk to the mid-career, we talk to the old. Not that the group in front of you is an old group, but I'm very excited to record this. And I thank my guests, who I will actually ask to introduce themselves in a bit. But this particular show has been in development for a while now. My guests and I, we've been talking about retirement. These two gentlemen, who you probably know, have successfully completed healthcare facilities management careers. Now they are navigating retirement, even though they're really not retired, as you will hear. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to first ask my guests to introduce themselves. And the guy who's to my left on the screen, could you go first, please? Who are you, and what are you doing now?
I'm Jack Goslin. My name Goslin is part of the company name in back of Pete's head, which is an honor for me to be part of Pete's, I guess, foundation or heritage, where the word would be. But I retired, well, not really totally retired, but as Pete was noting, I've changed my career pattern, I guess, in the last couple of years, and it's been interesting. It's been an interesting ride. I spent probably the better part of my last 40 years working in hospitals. That's just in facilities roles. Started the company Goslin Associates back in 2005, primarily as a recruiting tool for facilities managers to find jobs in hospitals, hire us to find candidates. Pete joined me, I think, in around 2015, and
14.
Right around there,
2014.
14.
Jack.
We kind of
Time
evolved
flies,
into, yeah, it really does. We evolved into a partnership, again, focusing on education as well as recruitment of facilities directors, and it really worked out well. Pete took the reins over as I kind of went out the back door, although I stay active, and Pete calls upon me to work on special projects and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing about retirement that I have to share this morning really was the transition. Everybody, you hit a certain age, it's not really, chronological when you say I'm going to retire now, but as you move down the road, suddenly you realize that it's a lot of work keeping up with your field. It's a dynamic field that we're in. It changes all the time. We really had to work very hard to stay knowledgeable and current. When you're doing the job, it's a lot easier because things are coming across your desk every day. You've got to address them, you got to learn, you got to grow with them. But when you're kind of sliding out the other way, you have to make the effort, and it's a big effort to stay current in your field. So as I kind of went down that retirement road, I, at the same time, looked at my life and I said, how am I going to redefine myself? Who is Jack these days? Who was he? Who is he? Who is he going to be as he grows up, or whatever the case may be? So one of my passions has always been sailing. Grew up sailing on Cape Cod. I live here not too far from Mystic. My wife and I have a boat down in Mystic. And so I decided I'd go out and get my captain's license so I could actually do this as a semi-professional. So I did that last year. And now when I have a job doing sailing at the Mystic Seaport, which actually pay me to take people out and tell them stories about the seaport. When they hired me, they said they wanted somebody who could sail and talk. My wife said they got the right guy for sure. So that's been a very pleasant experience for me. But as you well know, Pete.
Yes.
So anyway, that's been it's redefining. I spent the better part of my life just kind of adding knowledge and skill base that would prepare me for healthcare facility management work. And now suddenly I step back and I've kind of emptied that particular library and put a new library centered around boating and chartering and that kind of thing. And it's fun. It gave me a way to step aside and still have some purpose and not just spend the day mowing the lawn. So, that's been my story of transition, and it can be tough. I think if you don't ask yourself some hard questions about what am I going to do now, you can get old before your time very quickly. So you just want to keep up that momentum, whatever field you may be evolving into. So
thank you, Jack.
That's my deal, and I'll stick with it.
I would say quickly before we go down to Ed, and Ed introduces himself, that Jack and I, for years have had discussions about the field, obviously, not just the recruiting portion of it, but the candidate portion of it, and the people who are retiring, and what can we do. And so I thank Jack. I mean, I think this healthcare facilities network is kind of a natural extension out of all those conversations that we had. And Jack, you know this, how many times did we sit around the office having the same discussion about what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? How are we going to keep people into this field? Because hospitals are so integral, and we never really figured it out. We kind of made steps along the way, and I don't know that you ever figured it out, but I know that most of those discussions we had, Jack, we ended it by saying, let's go get some lunch. And so that was kind of our evolution.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's absolutely right.
It is still great to have Jack involved. And I think that this facilities network, and really what we're trying to do here by boosting the messaging and just getting exposure for this field, we've been thinking about it for 10, 15 years now. So I think this is a natural extension.
The other thing before just a couple of footnotes, been very involved in, as you know, in NIHIs over the years, and ASHI, I served on the board. I know Ed's very involved as well with those societies, and there's a lot to be gained from the networking, the face-to-face exposure that those societies give you in terms of the opportunity. And I always said to as I went through in my younger years and watched these societies evolve, there was always a couple of the old guys sitting in the back of the room complaining about everything, complaining about the way the society did things, the way they let their members in, how they define membership, how much they charge for dues. And, I said to myself, I remember when I was like in my 30s and looking at those guys in the back of the room, said, I never want to be those guys who just sit there in the back and complain about everything. By the time if that's all I become and that's all my input is of any value to society, I might as well just head out to pasture. So, be proactive. I mean, that's one thing I tried to do is not make it a big deal, but when you decide it's time to step away from your core profession, do in fact step away from it and don't get critical of things. It's time for the younger people to step in, help them, be available to them, but let them do their jobs, give them a long leash and let them grow like our predecessors allowed us to do as well.
Next, Ed.
Well, I know now that I just have to call you Captain Jack. There are a lot of famous Captain Jacks. I think there's a Morgan and there's a Sparrow and there's a few. Anyways, so thank you for letting me participate in this.
Thank you, Ed.
You guys know me. A lot of people do know me. I've been doing healthcare facility management for, I think I looked it up, it's like 38 years, which is kind of scary. Oh, who's barking in the background? That's not me.
That's my golden retriever.
Oh, okay. Well, my Labradoodle's in the other room sleeping. But anyways, 38 years. And then a few years back, I decided that it was time to do something a little bit different. And so it was early for me. I haven't even crossed the threshold of 65 yet. So that's coming up in the future. So my wife had one rule. She said, I married you for better, for worse, but not for lunch. So I had to figure out something else. So I stepped away from full-time work. And as you guys know, I've worked in small little hospitals and I've worked up in tertiary big hospitals, and it's a lot of fun and it's a lot of work, but I realized I wanted to do other fun stuff. And sailing is also my passion. That's Graves Light behind me in Boston Harbor. So we've always had a boat, my wife and I. I've always had a boat growing up. So, I wanted to keep sailing and going places with the boat. And oh, by the way, I got my captain's license too. But not to go, tooting around the Mystic Seaboard. I did that so that we could charter boats offshore a little bit. So, we've gone down to the British Virgin Islands and sailed around there, and we're hopefully going over to Croatia and Greece next year. And so, it's all about planning stuff while you can do that stuff that you wanted to do. So, we've done a lot of trips whether it's, the river cruises in Europe, or it's, the Grand Canyon, or up to Nova Scotia, or as I said, down to the BVI or Florida. We just try and keep planning the next trip. And my wife's in the other room right now planning on a trip in October to Amsterdam. So we want to keep going while our feet still work. But in the meantime, I gotta stay busy. So I engage myself in some consulting. And so I have two consulting hats that I wear. One's in the energy side of the industry, where I help different organizations decide what's best from maybe a power purchase agreement, or a net metering agreement, or a solar deal. And then on the other side, I'm doing some joint commission consulting, where I, will go into an organization and help them get ready for a survey. Though most recently, I've actually been doing a lot of teaching. So they've been tapping me to do a lot of seminars and webinars. In fact, next week I'm in Chicago doing an emergency management national seminar with the Joint Commission. So that's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And since you brought up the topic of the pipeline and bringing up the younger bucks into this industry, they actually tapped me to go down to a southern state and mentor a young man who's just really getting his feet wet in the environment of care, and that's a lot of fun too. So I've done a bunch of trips down
Let me,
south.
let me ask Ed, and I want to go back to the chartering boats for just a second. When
Sure.
you go to these locations, whether it's the Virgin Islands, I know you mentioned Croatia, are you captaining a boat and taking it to a destination? Is that what you're doing?
So we do what they call bareboat chartering. So you essentially rent an empty boat, and
Okay.
you take who you want with you. And my wife and I basically just past couple times we have what they call shorthanded the cruise. It's just us,
Wow.
just the two of us. And when someone leases you or rents you a boat of that's worth a lot of money, they want to make sure you have credentials so they
Yep.
get their boat back. So having those extra things like the license will help, especially when you go over to across the pond.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you know, so there's a market for this across the pond and across the world. Did you learn this before you retired? Or are you finding that out now? What's
Oh,
happening?
it's all finding out as you go, because there are folks that just think they can put a credit card down and sail a boat, right, Jack? And that's not that's not always a good thing to do. And so, and I've always been out on the water. I mean, my original degree was with the Mass Maritime Academy, so that's
Yeah.
always been water.
Yep.
But there's always been water somewhere near me.
Right. We had on for our Filling the Pipeline, our episode 1, we had on the folks from Mass Maritime, relative to the college perspective, and they're excellent. So Ed and Jack, you and I were still working. I remember when Jack and I found out that you retired from Cambridge Health Alliance, where you Jack, I remember saying to you, I'm surprised Ed retired. I mean, it's like you said, it was surprising from our perspective. Obviously, we're not you, that wow, he's still young and he's still got runway. So we were surprised by that. But it sounds like you had a plan. I mean, it wasn't kind of Willie. You had, you and your wife had talked about it, and it was an intentional. I mean, it's always intentional. You have to give your notice, but it was intentional on your part.
Right. Exactly.
Was it difficult to step away? And Jack, I'll ask the same thing to you after Ed answers, because I know you and I have had these discussions, and I've always said to you, I think, Jack, kind of your path is fascinating only because I had a front row seat to it. But relative for you stepping away, Ed, was it difficult to do it at a young age and with runway in front of you?
Once we figured out the math, and you got to figure out the math, the math worked. And I also had that rule, better for worse, not for lunch. So I had to come up with some stuff to get me out of the house, or she'd kill me. So that, started down the consulting role. So I had already, put that out there, I'd already gotten some links and some good connections with a couple of consulting gigs potentials, and those were coming to fruition.
Okay.
And I said, well, why not?
Yeah.
Again, the math has to work. It did.
And are you able within your consulting, in the consulting work that you do, are you able to kind of control the schedule and work when you want? And how does
Yeah,
that work for you?
yeah. I'm lucky enough to be in a situation with both of those options to be able to say, this is what I can do, and take advantage of my available time. And the available time fills up, amazingly enough.
Yeah.
And then what professionally is unavailable, that's when we go do fun stuff. So,
Nice balance.
well, that's, I hate to say it, but having been forced to stay home for the past couple of years due to the world health situation around COVID, kind of taught me a lot of new skills about how to work from this desk here. It's like, you know,
Yeah.
that's like a whole new skill set. I actually was able to do teaching and webinars right here from my home office, which honed my skills in a way that I probably never anticipated, but has worked out well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Excellent. Jack.
The thing that comes to mind with me quite a bit is the socialization aspect of retirement and work. I think a lot of people hang on to their jobs because they have no other choice but get up in the morning. They've been doing that for years and go to work. But one of the advantages of that is that you're always thrown in the middle of a lot of a beehive of activity. I mean, just think when you sit at your desk at a hospital, people are in and out of your office all day long asking what they should do about that, how they should approach this, what kind of project work we need to do. And that's stimulating, and that gives, I think, everybody a personal rush inside of them. I'm valued, people appreciate me. I'm a leader. I mean, all those kind of things that when you consider looking at the next step in your life of retirement, those things all go away. I mean, they go away in the way you know them right now, but not to say you still can't make that a part of it. I have tried through my boating and through my social activity, my wife and I, to maintain a lot of relationships that we've had from the past that we still maintain. Pete and you and I are one of those. I mean, you continue the relationships and you keep the feedback and the stimulation going. And that's important because I think I see a lot of people just kind of check out. They head out to pasture, they hop on their lawnmower, they hop on their pool vacuum or whatever the case may be. And that's all they do all day. And then they say to themselves, is that all there is? But as Ed said, and I'm saying too, that, you turn the corner, you change your sneakers and off you go into another direction. And I guess you twist and turn, but you really do redefine yourself and you get that socialization through your new avenue of work. I think that's an important factor in looking at, where you are and where you're going in retirement.
I agree. I've stayed active with NIHIs. I've stayed active with the Boston Hospital Plan Engineers, which, by the way, is where all the old guys went that were complaining. They sit around a table and now do it. So, and ASHI, I'm still, like on the books later today. I'm on on two of their committees still. I kind of question why, but anyways, no, they're all great professional groups, and I rely on them, as I do my consulting, because there's so many times where people say, well, how do you know how to do something? Like, whatever, pick a topic. And it's like, well, there are a lot of great resources out there. You just have to tap into them.
And Jack, this, and for years. So, you formed the company in 2005, and for years, you counseled people who were thinking about retiring, but you weren't retired yet. But you gave advice about retiring. So you have an interesting perspective. As I said, you're not fully retired, you're still involved, but what was it like when you transitioned over from, working full-time, consulting full-time to your retirement? did you find that, like, did you think back to the things you used to say to people and now here you are in that position? Was that a hard transition? And what did you think about all those things you had said over the years now that you were actually dealing with the reality of, okay, I need to find that path. I need to find that socialization that works for me.
Well, that's an interesting question, and I'm just kind of pondering what kind of answer I could give to that. I know that, the environment of working full time, regardless of whether you're with a large hospital system or you're in a small little rural hospital, your role is nicely defined. I mean, there's areas that you probably do better in, areas that you need help in, but once you've defined yourself and defined your personality and defined your style and your leadership ability, you fall into a niche, and it's a comfortable niche for the most part. I'm sure there's bumps in the road, we all know, but people, as they go down the road, they get stale. People get stale in their job, and I think your temperament for your job may be more prone to getting more stale quicker, if that makes sense, as you get older. I mean, you're less tolerant. Just think about, as we all get older, we're less tolerant of a lot of things in our life. We've been there, done that. We see the results, and we tell our kids all the time, this is the way we should be doing it. This is the way you should look at things. Frankly, we're supposed to be experts because of all the years we've drawn upon professionally and personally to develop who we truly are. And now we're at a point where we're jumping off into a new area where, again, as I said in the beginning, I think there was a book that I read, and I forget the name of it, but the author talked about standing in a 55-gallon drum, basically, when you're 18 or 20 years old, and putting into the drum things that you find along the way: education, experience, all the tools you need to make yourself who you are professionally. All right. We have Jack as a professional, and he's got all these skill sets in his bucket that he moves through life with. When you retire, you jump out of that bucket and you take that bucket and you turn it over and spill it on the ground, and you pick a few things up that you might need as you head down the road. But honestly, you're looking at putting new things into that bucket because you're redefining yourself. When I go out in the public, people, hey, Jack, how you been? I haven't seen you in a long time. How's it going? What are you doing? And my first reaction, I'm going to go back and talk about my professional, but that's not me anymore. It's a new Jack. So I have to really work hard to define the kind of things that make me happy, the kind of things that make me productive, and give me a value to who this new Jack may have been. So I don't know if that makes sense, but a lot of it is, I know a lot of people struggle with that, in reinventing themselves, or at least inventing themselves in the retirement world that they live in now.
Ed, did you have something similar to that from kind of that professional identity perspective when you changed over?
Well, it's taking that knowledge base that you've acquired over decades and trying to make it work again in a different venue. That was my challenge. Healthcare is specialized in one sense and not in others, I suppose, but when it comes to facilities management, and it's that, from my perspective, it was all about taking care of the patient. And if you can take care of the patient from the boiler room or from the roof or from the kitchen, there's a wealth of knowledge that we've all acquired in this industry. It should be translatable into helping people come up through the ranks. And so that's kind of where I came at it from, is I should be able to teach folks. And lo and behold, so far that's working. Whether it is a mock survey type teaching event, or if it's, and I guess that's important for me to distinguish. I'm not a surveyor, I'm a consultant. I go in and help people get ready for those survey people. And that, again, that's all a teaching moment, and that's what keeps me moving in the right direction.
Yeah.
So
have you enjoyed your transition, Ed?
Oh yeah, it's great. You gotta keep contributing, and that's what this is all about to me anyways. And then go have fun.
When did you get your captain's license, Ed?
I think that was back in October.
Okay, so so this question goes to both of you. And Jack, obviously, I kind of had a front row seat to you going for your captain's license, which you got within the past year. And I've always said to you, Jack, that I think, proud of you for having done that, because I think getting your license, going back to school, which you kind of did, going back to studying, it can be daunting, and you did it and you got that license. I know that sometimes that can be a barrier for people. They could be intimidated by that. I haven't looked at books in 40 years. Now I'm going to go back and get my captain's license. But what would you say to people who are, retiring, thinking about retirement, about going back, hitting the books for whatever it is, whether it's your captain's license or some other formal, what encouragement would you give those people to say, hey, you can do this. If it's part of your career journey and it's part of where you want to go for it and try to get it. What advice would you give those people who are maybe doubting themselves doing it?
Well,
And
I'd probably start off by, I'd probably start off by saying if you're doubting yourself, just accept the fact that as you get older, this doesn't matter whether you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, or 80s. As you get older, it's harder to learn, and I found that through everything. Whether it's technology you're trying to learn, or reading a book or whatever, but going back and studying for a captain, I've been doing this stuff for 60 years of my life. I started on Cape Cod sailing when I was just a little kid. And I know which all the rules of the road, I know how to navigate, but when you put it in a classroom setting and a multiple choice test, it was a challenge. And, I had to take a couple of the modules a couple of times over and take their exam a couple of times because I didn't do well the first time around. And I look at some of the younger folks in the class who, like some of these folks who are getting their license so they could be a commercial fisherman and get their own boat. They were in and out of that class in 5 minutes, and I'd be sitting there for hours later still trying to digest this stuff. So acknowledge the fact that as you get older, it takes longer to learn and retain things. Just give yourself a break. Don't beat yourself up so much on that kind of thing. But getting the license to me was a great experience. And now the other footnote of that, as I mentioned, I'm working for the Mystic Seaport down in Mystic, and they have a number of boats that they put me out on, and I take people out for sails and motors around the harbor and tell stories and make people enjoy the water and appreciate the water. But at the same time, the Mystic Seaport is an organization, and I haven't worked for an organization in many, many years. So here I am trying to learn a culture of an organization that is very strange to me. And that's taking a lot of work right now. But once I get it, I think I'm going to be fine. But it is interesting. You tend to, in your career, people look for your opinions and you give opinions. And when you're put in a situation I am like the Seaport, I'm new, and I wonder a lot of times why they do the things they do, but I don't think I'm in a position to tell them how to do things because I have no idea, really what their grand culture is. So that's been the other part of it as well. As you evolve into new roles in your retirement, give yourself a chance to change with it, and not be the one who's you're no longer the decision maker necessarily, and that's a role that us facilities folks aren't used to very often. So I hope that all makes sense.
It does. Great answer.
Do you get a discount at the company store?
I do.
Just saying, don't. Well, I don't know. Just little benefits, Jack. Don't just write off that organization. You can always get a free T-shirt.
Absolutely.
How about for you, Ed? How was that studying process?
So it's not easy. We'd be kidding everybody if we said it was easy. But I did a lot of online courses. There are a bunch of organizations out there that help you get ready for these tests, and they'll do mock exams and all that. And so I went down that road. I have no idea how, and that costs a little bit of money to tie into those schools and take their mock tests and all that. There are people that just walk into the Coast Guard office in downtown Boston and take the test. It's like, are you kidding? And again, back in the day when I graduated from the academy, there were multiple days of tests, and we went through 4 years of school getting ready for those Coast Guard tests. And I remember that pain and suffering a little too late in this little process. But again, it's getting your brain to understand how to take a test again. And the more you practice, the easier it became. So and they take the whole process very seriously. I did it all here at home, all the tests, but they were video monitored. There's actually somebody watching me take the test to make sure I didn't bring an extra pencil into the room. It was pretty funny. So
well, Jack, you didn't do it that way, right? Did you go in person for the testing?
Yeah, I did a physical test with the instructor just, set me up and put me in the corner of the room and off I went. And, but, it was proctored. I mean, it all multiple choice. I think as Ed can attest to, and we all can, the multiple choice tests are some of the harder ones, even though you know the answers right in front of you. You have to utilize a strategy not to get, as they say. I remember being part of the ASHE CHFM item writing committee years ago when they first came up with the CHFM exam, and they called them, they were multiple choice tests, and they called them distractors. They put an answer that's close to the right answer under B. The right answer would be under C, and A and D wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. And so the challenge in testing, I think, is really developing a strategy for the multiple choice. But no, there's a large body of knowledge that it's in there somewhere. It's just a matter of bringing it out at the right time.
And you passed the drug test, Jack, right? Yeah.
I did it repeatedly.
Because there's more than just taking a multiple choice test to get this. They take it very seriously, and they had to do a whole security screening so that we got our what's called a transportation workers identity card, and a medical clearance, and all of that folds up into whether they'll even consider your application. You got to get through those hurdles.
And then we get into our sea time and our history on the water, which is very, very robust. I mean, years of how many sea days we have. And I mean, you think you're out in your boat a lot until you start looking at pulling out this form and you go, my God. So it's a very robust protocol to go through. When you come out the other end and you get that in the mail that day, you feel pretty good about yourself. I'm sure you did as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to talk boats and sailing in a second, but one last question, and it came to mind relative to relative to your love of the ocean, and you both have been sailing for many, many years. When you were in your roles working in healthcare facilities on a daily basis, did you guys, and I'm getting to stress because, as you know, stress is everywhere these days. Everybody feels stressed with everything that's going on. But did you guys was sailing an outlet for you when you were working full-time to get out on the water and decompress? What did you do to decompress and to get away from the daily grind of healthcare facilities management? Ed, why don't we go with you first?
Sure. No, I similar to Jack, I've always had some sort of boat, mostly sailboats. And wherever we lived, when I was down in Connecticut, or whether I was up on Cape Cod, or whether I was here just outside of Boston, we had a boat in the water or on a trailer, and I've learned to hate trailers forever. But we were always doing something to get out on the water. If you look at my garage, I've got 4 kayaks stacked up along one wall, so whether it's and one of them is a sailing kayak, so we use those when we can, though once the main boat goes in the water, those go by the wayside. And I've got a boat in the basement that I just finished building that's going to be one of the dinghies that I use. So how big is that?
You built? Yeah.
Big enough. I had to cut it in half to get it out of the basement. No, I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm not. It actually is designed to be cut in half so that it nests. Wow. So I'm going to bring it down to the Mystic Seaport and see if they'll give me a space for it, because it's kind of neat. But
we can make that happen. We'll make it happen then.
There you go. So yeah, you have to have a hobby. So whether it's sailing, and that's very seasonally dependent, right?
Yeah.
So the other thing, I've got a workshop in the basement, and I've got grandchildren that need toys, so things get built in the basement to make the grandchildren happy.
Nice. Jack.
For me, there's nothing better than getting out in the water in a sailboat and having the wind come up and having the boat just forging its own way through the water without any motor, naturally powered, the sound of the water on the hull, the sound of the wind in the sail. It can turn me from an ugly individual to the happiest man on the planet. I can't emphasize that enough. For me, nothing like sailing to put me in a better mood. and usually what I'm finding at the seaport, one of the main boats that I'm sailing is an old 1800 catboat replica of an 1850 catboat that was made on the Cape at Crosby Boat Yards. It's not a catamaran, it's a wide working boat with a huge sail. I get 6 passengers out on it every trip I take, and I take trips every half an hour, and everybody always asks the same question, how fast are we going to go, or how does this thing work? And as soon as the wind catches the sail and we start on a broad reach across the bay, everybody, all 6 people on the boat in unison, just their mouth drops open and they go, this is pretty cool. This is really cool. And this thing is all powered by nature.
Yeah.
And so for me, that really works well. And I mean, as far as in the winter's concerned, I mean, I just live for dreaming, watching videos of our boat from last summer and, get through the winter somehow. But no, just being out in a sailboat will make me have a new attitude about life in general, and things are all good when I am out there.
Yeah. I mean, there's something about being out on the ocean. And Jack, you know this. So Jack loves sailboats, and he and I have talked about this so often. I grew up with power boats, and so I was kind of not a snob, because I don't think you can be a powerboat snob, right? Or maybe but
Oh yeah, you can.
so,
Yeah, you can.
yeah,
If I gotta go. No, I'm kidding.
okay, all right. So, but Ed, Jack would always say, "Hey, you got to come out. You got to come out," because I never sailed. It was just always. We had a powerboat. My friends had powerboats, and there was nothing like having a Boston whaler. We grew up in Narragansett, down on the coast, and hopping over the waves and just jumping them and running out to Block Island. And Jack's like, you got to come out in the sailboat. So when I finally did go with them, you're right. I mean, when you had the sail up and we're going across the sound and the wind hits it, it is very nice. I could see why you would love it, because it's a different experience. Everything from the sound to the ripples, it's completely different than being out on a powerboat where you can't usually hear.
And there's obviously an economy to it as well. This is a cute story that Ed will appreciate. The other day, I was walking down to my boat at the marina with a 5-gallon red jar or blue jar of jerry can of diesel fuel, and I passed this guy who just docked this like 3 outboard power boat. As I'm walking by him, and I looked at him and I said, "This is my entire season of fuel." And just kind of smiled and winked at him. He looked at me and says, "But it takes you 2 years to get there." So we left it at that. But there is something about I have a small diesel in our catboat, our personally owned catboat, which always gets us there. Motors, and sometimes it's something you need to have, but sailing's the best all the way around. So,
Ed, what's your main boat?
Mine only uses 10 gallons a year, Jack. Mine is a 32-foot Beneteau sloop.
Okay.
And we can take that just about anywhere, at least in the New England area. So we try and carve out enough time to go places if we can. Or sometimes we'll just sail around. We'll go out in Boston Harbor and we'll go out to this light, behind me, which is just at the outside of the harbor, and we'll go out in the bay and see whales and seals and whatever else is out there, and big ships coming in trying to distract us.
Yeah, Ed sent me a picture of a big ship in the background, which I will post to the video so you can see it. When Ed sent it over, I said, "How close did you get to that thing?" And what was your I can't remember, what was your answer?
Close enough.
Close enough.
Here's another one behind me now. This is we're always seeing this big ship traffic coming in and out. But
I remember we went over to Newport on the boat, and I think the QE2 was in, and you pulled up as close as you get, but it's seeing pictures and then just being on the water and looking up at them, what they're really like, it just doesn't. It's very intimidating. It's like, wow.
Was that the time then she went through the Cape Cod Canal and almost didn't make it?
This was
that's the trip, because they brought her through Buzzards Bay, and now there's a new marking on the chart called Queen's Bottom.
Okay.
Because Queen's Bottom is where they left their bottom paint, because they timed it wrong.
We were going to
those ships always look like they're moving so much faster or slower than they are. I mean, even that picture behind Ed there, it looks like it's just creeping along, but it's probably doing 15 knots.
It's doing 15 knots, and then some of those crazy power boaters try and cut them off, and
cut across the top
those
there.
those big guys, they can't stop. They cannot stop, and
They can't.
they will run you down, unfortunately, and it has happened.
And as the expression goes, the ocean is always trying to kill you.
Yeah,
Keep that in mind.
That's right.
absolutely. So, final question, and let's keep it sail related. What is, and just so people know, we were actually going to try to go out on Ed's boat or Jack's boat,
which we can still do.
Yes,
if you want to do chapter 2 of this, we can still do.
Yeah, we were gonna videotape it. Although my wife makes fun of me, I guess you don't call it videotape, whatever you call it these days.
I do. I call it videotape.
I do as well. So, but the weather isn't so great today, and there's always boat issues. But tell me, as we go, and my thanks to Ed and to Jack for joining me. You talked about the seas always trying to kill you, and I remember, one of our worst moments on the boat was when the boat died in a thunderstorm and we were off Block Island, and man, it comes in quickly and it was scary and just, it wouldn't start. And fortunately it did, and it gets scary quickly. What is a moment on the ocean, good or bad, that you recall in your sailing careers? Is there a moment, because I always think of that, I'll never forget that. Is there a moment or a situation that stands out to you when you think about being out there on the water in your boat? Ed, you want to go first? What, Jack?
Go ahead, Ed.
So I think I mentioned my wife and I are usually just the two of us. And so this was this past February where we were down in the British Virgin Islands, and we were sailing along to our next harbor that we were going to, and there had been a prediction of thunderstorms. And lo and behold, and these things come up over the other, the islands pretty quickly because of the heat that rises off the islands, and then they come down into the bays rather violently. And we were out in the middle where we couldn't get to a safe harbor very quickly, and I could see it coming. And my wife loves to read her Kindle while we're sailing, and her back was to the bow and she's facing me, and I just decided not to tell her. And all of it, she was so comfortable, and her hand is the rain is coming down and she's got her hand out and she's under the canopy, so she's dry. I'm getting soaked. The waves are picking up 3, 4, 5 feet.
Yeah.
I could see this was only going to be like 30 minutes of misery, and we were in a big enough boat that I knew it would handle it well, but it was just hilarious. And once we got through it and she could see the dark clouds behind us, she's like, "Oh, that was fun." It's like sometimes it helps to turn around and put the Kindle down, honey, but that's okay.
That might have worked out better for you in the long run.
Well, and it happens. These quick storms, as you described, come up quick, and we had that happen off of Situate once, where it was like a downdraft microburst that came down on top of us, and the next thing you know, we were literally not flipped over, but flipped around facing the other direction, and we had almost completely broached, which would have put us in a precarious situation, but it happens, and you have to be ready for it. And if we even suspect that there's some bad weather coming, we always have our PFDs on. Personal flotation devices, for those that don't know what that is. So
you trade in your PPE for your PFD.
Exactly. Though during COVID, we had both on board.
Jack, how about you?
Well, I'm just thinking as Ed's talking, in all my years of boating, I really have not had any events that stick in my mind as far as, being scared out of my mind about survival or whatever. Probably, if anything, fog is something that is very prevalent where we sail, and I'm sure Ed's run into fog before. Fog certainly is not your friend, and we don't have, I know you have radar on your boat. We don't have radar on our small cat boat. And we found ourselves many times out there, and it just is a wave of a cloud at the surface of the water coming across at you, and all of a sudden you're engulfed in it. Everything sounds different, everything looks different. Your world contracts to a point that you look around and you hear horns, you hear boats, really scary fog. And I mean, even with all the advancements today and, handheld devices and navigation programs and the like, fog is very intimidating. And I probably think back in time. Last summer, my wife and I were coming back from our week-long cruise to the Cuttyhunk and ran into some fog off of Watch Hill, Rhode Island. And I just kept doing circles around this one buoy that we knew where we were and waited until the fog cleared. And then finally, we'll move on, but not to panic, just to realize that this will eventually change. But fog can be scary, and that's my story, and I'll stick with it. Thanks, Pete.
No, God, Jack, I was expecting something, a tale from like an orca or something.
Nothing there.
Have you heard about the orcas off of Spain?
No.
Yes, we have.
You've heard it, right? I actually took this article out of the New York Times, and there's a pod of orcas that are attacking sailboats.
Really?
And they've even sunk a few.
Wow. Did they circle them in, and what's their mode of attack?
They just ram the boat until something happens.
Wow.
And people have had to be rescued by it's off the Iberian coast, so I guess that's Spain and Portugal. And those coast guards have come out to rescue people. It's very unusual, and the theory is that some sailboat killed a baby orca somewhere along the line. And these very intelligent creatures, we're sitting in it's their world, they own it, and we're just skirting an edge of it. And this particular group of occupants of the watery world of the ocean have decided they don't want sailboats anymore. So.
Well, that's really interesting. I'm going to look that up. And that I lied. Just let me ask you one more thing, if you guys don't mind. And there was a story. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago now. There was a cruise ship off the Carolinas. I think it was 2 or 3 weekends ago, where there was a storm coming off the mid-Atlantic. Did you see this, where they got caught in it? And it was really well forecast. Water breached it, and the bottom areas of the boat flooded, and people got sick. And it wasn't a surprise storm like a thunderstorm that pops up. From your captaining perspective, and granted, you're not on a Carnival ship, but you're still, your thought processes are the same. You can still go to the bottom just like them. Did you hear of this story? And why would a captain go through that? Is it all timing? You got to get back to the dock for the next ship. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? And I'd imagine you could extend that to your healthcare facilities career too, putting your hospital in harm's way, during a hurricane or a nor'easter for us out here in the East Coast. But did you see that story? And what do you think of the captain's actions?
I did see that story. It was unclear to me whether that water that was showing flowing down the hallways was salt water or not.
Okay.
That seemed really odd that salt water could get that high in the ship.
Yeah.
So during violent motion on some of those bigger ships, that could have been a tank of some other kind of water that got sloshed back up onto that floor. Don't know. So, but there's pretty sophisticated weather prediction devices out there.
Yeah.
They maybe he avoided the worst of it. But it is hurricane season out there.
Yeah. Yeah. You can be humbled really quickly.
No, I'm sure that these boats are pressured by profits and getting from places to places. I mean, a lot of that is same in aviation and flying in bad weather, and they've developed sophisticated onboard radar to avoid these situations, but it's still there. I mean, just in closing, I think I told you this story last week, Pete. I was out at the seaport, and I had 6 people on the boat, and I leave the dock, and I said, any questions to get started, and I'll kind of narrative as we sail around the bay. And this one woman looked at me and said, how deep is it water right here? I said, that's kind of an interesting question. I said, I don't know, maybe 20 feet, something like that. And then she kind of hushed up, and then she said, how long have you been sailing? And I turned around, I looked back at the dock, and I said, about 3 minutes. And she lets out this kind of scream. And I said, no, it's going to be over 60 years. Honestly, I didn't do what you're asking. But, people have an inherent fear of the sea, and I just think it's a good thing. I myself personally, I think Ed probably would agree with, I'm very, very conservative when it comes to my time on the water. If I have an opportunity to take a chance to save some time or whatever, I think the whole thing through, and generally, and my wife will agree with me on this, is that we're not going to take any chances, whether it be with thunderstorms, fog, weather. Very conservative, and I think that's the way you enjoy sailing and being on the water for a lot of years to come. So you know, we think it through, and hopefully we'll be safe for all our sailing days.
We have seen our share of stupid people on the water. They are people that, and it's happened a lot more in the past 24 months because a lot of people decided during COVID, we'll just go get a boat and
Sure.
and do our social distancing on the water. And there are a lot of people that came out with absolutely no knowledge, and a lot of people that ended up literally on the rocks in their new to them boats. So I have a lot of friends that you know, there's a couple of companies out there. There's Sea Tow and there's Boat US, and you can call them up and they'll come tow you when you get in trouble. A lot of folks don't realize you have to sign up for that in advance. So we love listening to the radio, Jack. I don't know if you do that. We turn it on channel 16, as you should, and you listen to all these crazy people getting in trouble.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, the professional tow companies are fighting over these people because they don't have memberships. This is the rescues that will cost thousands of dollars instead of zip. So
Wow. It's always entertaining when it's not you, right? Always.
It's yeah. And what I always get concerned about is when I see people out there doing stupid stuff, that there might be kids on board or something, and that's happened too, sadly. So.
Yeah. Yep. Well, Jack Goslin, Ed Brown, I appreciate your time this morning. I think there's a lot to discuss, and hopefully we can do a follow-up on the water.
Let's do that.
Now that the
I'd love to do
summer's
that.
here.
Love to do that.
So we will do part 2 from the water. So this is Peter Martin from the Healthcare Facilities Network. Again, my thanks to Jack, my thanks to Ed. Thank you for tuning in, and we will be back with another episode. Thanks so much. Have a great day. This has been a presentation of the Healthcare Facilities Network. Please like this video,